Welcome to Gray Matters with Doc W, where red and blue politics mix to create a thoughtful gray area. I'm your host, a real PhD psychologist, neuroscientist, teacher, and mentor with over 30 years of experience. This is my avatar to ensure that the influence of my personal perspective is minimized. As the holidays bring us together, we're bound to encounter challenging, politically sensitive conversations. Our AI-generated discussions offer a calm, respectful approach to tough topics, allowing both progressive and conservative viewpoints to be presented fairly. Today, we'll be exploring the complex issues impacting the LGBTQ plus members of our communities. So let's dive in and listen to what our AI participants, Joe, a licensed clinical social worker at a community nonprofit, Krystin, chief financial officer at a mid-sized manufacturing firm, and Chris, a chef at a local restaurant who also identifies as a member of the LGBTQ+ community, have to say on this hot-button topic. Our goal here at Gray Matters is to foster understanding and open dialogue with the ones we love.
Krystin, oh my goodness, it's been so long. How are you doing? You look fantastic. By the way, have you been keeping busy? I'd love to catch up. It's just so great to see you after all this time. I've often wondered what you've been up to since we last spoke. Fill me in on everything.
Busy, Joe. Work hasn't slowed down one bit. But it's good to be here with everyone for the holidays. How's the nonprofit world treating you?
It's challenging but fulfilling. The usual people problems, but we've seen a growing number of young people seeking support around issues related to sexual orientation and gender identity. A lot of them feel overwhelmed by some recent policies that restrict discussions of LGBTQ plus topics in schools.
I've heard about those. Parents in certain states have been vocal about wanting more control over what's taught in schools. They argue topics like sexual orientation and gender identity might be too sensitive for younger grades. I've read coverage in the Wall Street Journal about these so-called don't say gay laws. Some states want to limit discussions to certain age groups. I think they're trying to protect kids from concepts they might not be ready for.
I understand the concern, but from a mental health standpoint, if a child is questioning their identity and the school is barred from providing any guidance or even acknowledging it, that can be really isolating. The Trevor Project has data showing that LGBTQ plus youth are at a higher risk for suicide if they don't have supportive environments.
I'm not against giving kids support. I just think parents should have a say in how schools address these topics, especially when it comes to very young children. A lot of conservatives, myself included, want to avoid what we perceive as government overreach. We worry about losing local control and parental rights.
Right. And I do believe collaboration with parents can be helpful, as long as it's not shutting down conversations entirely. Some kids don't have supportive families, and schools can be their only safe place. If we ban or severely limit any mention of LGBTQ plus issues, those kids might feel erased.
That's fair. I suppose we need to find a balance. Another angle I worry about is the business side. If federal or state laws impose certain policies about LGBTQ plus healthcare or employee benefits, it can become expensive, especially for mid-sized companies. We're always trying to comply with a patchwork of regulations.
Sure, compliance can be a headache, but there's also a business case for inclusivity. Forbes ran an article about how inclusive policies can increase employee retention and satisfaction, ultimately boosting the bottom line. A supportive workplace can be beneficial for everyone, not just LGBTQ plus individuals.
I agree. Happy employees do make for a more efficient workplace. But there are also legal gray areas. Take the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, for example. That's a high-profile example where religious freedom and LGBTQ plus rights clashed in the commercial arena. Some business owners worry about lawsuits if they don't handle every scenario perfectly.
I see the tension, and we're not lacking in examples. After the Supreme Court's Bostock v. Clayton County decision, employers are indeed required under Title VII to avoid discriminating based on sexual orientation or gender identity. That's broad, and it impacts hiring, firing, and workplace policies. But I think it ultimately promotes fairness.
I'm certainly not against fairness. It's just that many conservative folks want to ensure religious liberty isn't trampled. If someone's sincerely held beliefs conflict with certain tasks, like designing a custom item for a same-sex wedding, they wonder if they'll be forced to choose between faith and business. The law is evolving, and it's confusing for a lot of us.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Krystin. Sorry I couldn't help but overhear. Mind if I join you two? I've got my own thoughts on this since I'm part of the LGBTQ+ community myself.
Of course, Chris. It's good to see you, man. Please do.
Absolutely, Chris. Happy to have your perspective. Joe and I can't fully speak to your experiences.
It is good to see you guys. Thanks for letting me join in. Look, I get the concerns around parental rights and religious freedom. But from personal experience, I can tell you that stigma and rejection can be devastating. When I came out, my family struggled to accept it. Thankfully, I eventually found support at a local community center, but not everyone is so lucky.
I'm sorry you had a rough time. As a conservative, it's not that I want anyone to feel unwelcome or unsupported. I just have concerns about the scope of government and how it might override personal or religious beliefs.
Trust me, I get it. But let me tell you where the rubber meets the road. When laws or company policies are vague, people like me can face discrimination. Maybe it's a landlord who refuses to rent to me because I'm gay, or a boss who's reluctant to give me the same health benefits for my spouse. Even if it's not always blatant, the uncertainty creates barriers. The New York Times has reported on housing and employment discrimination cases that slip through the cracks, especially in states without strong anti-discrimination laws.
Those are real-life implications. And as a social worker, I see clients in crisis over these exact issues. Lack of housing, job insecurity, and family rejection can compound into severe mental health problems.
I believe those challenges are real. We also must consider how we craft laws. For instance, the proposed Equality Act would extend federal protections to LGBTQ+ people in housing, education, and public accommodations. But some argue it lacks adequate exemptions for religious organizations. The coverage on CNN shows there's strong debate about whether or not to include those carve-outs.
I think the key is to protect essential services. You want to worship according to your beliefs, absolutely. But if I need emergency medical care, or if I'm just trying to dine at a restaurant, I shouldn't be turned away because of who I am.
That makes sense. From a CFO's perspective, I'd also like consistency across states. Operating in multiple locations becomes a bureaucratic nightmare if each place has wildly different anti-discrimination rules. Sometimes a clear federal guideline is easier for business. It's one rule book instead of 50.
Exactly. And about those costs you mentioned, Krystin, repeated legal disputes can cost far more than making sure policies comply with inclusive standards. Plus, providing inclusive health care, like covering mental health support, might actually save money if it means fewer sick days or less turnover.
In my restaurant, we're a small team. I can't afford turnover. It's expensive to train new hires. Creating a welcoming environment makes a big difference in morale and retention. Also, being openly LGBTQ+ helps my employees trust me more. We're a family there.
I appreciate that viewpoint, Chris. Let's see if we can brainstorm some solutions that balance different needs. Clarity in legislation, push for clearer laws at the federal level, maybe an updated version of the Equality Act that acknowledges religious freedoms but ensures essential services can't be denied. Parent-teacher communication? Schools could offer transparent guidelines to parents on how and when topics like gender identity and sexual orientation are discussed, so there's less fear of the unknown.
Yes, those are strong starts. I'd add local support networks. Encourage partnerships between nonprofits and local businesses to offer counseling services and housing assistance for LGBTQ+ youth, funded partially by philanthropic efforts or government grants. Small business education. Chambers of Commerce could host free or low-cost workshops on inclusivity, so owners like you, Krystin, don't have to navigate all these regulations alone.
I'd like to see clear corporate policies. Even mid-sized companies can adopt a basic non-discrimination statement and train HR managers. This doesn't have to be expensive. Welcoming spaces for youth. If schools have restrictions on LGBTQ+ discussions, maybe community centers can step in with after-school support groups, ensuring no kid falls through the cracks.
I'm on board with the idea that prevention and early intervention help everyone. If we can keep young people, LGBTQ+ or not, out of crisis, that's not just morally right, it's fiscally responsible. Crisis response is always more expensive than prevention.
Agreed. And from a social worker's perspective, I see how crucial it is for kids to know they're valued. If legislation or attitudes signal that their identity is unacceptable, it can have long-term consequences.
Absolutely. Thanks for letting me share my personal angle. I hope we can all keep an open mind.
I appreciate your honesty, Chris. I think we can find reasonable compromises that respect both moral convictions and people's dignity.
Couldn't have said it better. Now, before dessert disappears, why don't we continue this conversation over a slice of pie?
Deal. Let's make sure we bring this same spirit of understanding to the rest of the family tonight.
Agreed. Maybe after dessert, we can even talk about the supply chain woes, though that might be even more complicated.
Ha ha. One thing at a time, Krystin. Let's find the toddlers and remind ourselves what it's like to be able to just get lost in the holiday.
Thanks for tuning in to Gray Matters with Doc W. Our AI-generated characters, Joe, Karen, and Chris, shared their perspectives on LGBTQ+ issues to shed light on these complex conversations without the heat that often accompanies family debates. As we navigate the gray between red and blue, let's keep our focus on respectful, understanding communication, especially around topics that can be deeply personal and political. If you'd like more details on how today's conversation was created, check out the text that accompanies this video. You'll find the original prompt we used to generate this dialogue, along with additional context on our process. Let us know what you'd like to explore next time on Gray Matters in the comments. And be sure to catch our next episode, where we'll tackle more challenging issues, equipping you with tools for meaningful, respectful dialogue with the ones you love. This is Doc W signing off. Remember, where red meets blue, using our gray matter matters most. Keep talking, keep listening, and keep building. We'll see you again soon for another episode of Gray Matters.